Hello and welcome to World Connect. The past 1 week was historic for several reasons. After more than 5 decades of military rule, Myanmar swore in hundreds of lawmakers in its first freely elected parliament. In a ruling that angered some and vindicated others, a UN panel ruled that Julian Assange is being arbitrarily detained since 2010. And the race for the next president of the United States of America well and truly began. Expect all that and more in this brand new edition of World Connect, your window to the world. Let's get started with the focus of the show. Thousands of Syrian refugees flee fighting in northern Aleppo province, even as US prepares for possible airdrops of humanitarian supplies over Syria. And nations pledge over $10 billion to help displaced Syrians after UN suspends peace talks. US presidential polls get off to an exciting start. Iowa caucuses see Republican Ted Cruz surging past Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton warding off a tie with Bernie Sanders by a whisker. Spotlight shifts to New Hampshire primary. The deal is done but yet to roll out. 12 member nations signed Trans-Pacific Partnership Pact to boost trade and economic activity. Naysayers raise a red flag. At least 6 member nations need to ratify the pact in 2 years for it to come into effect. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange declares victory after a UN panel rules that Swedish and UK governments arbitrarily detained him since 2010. But does that mean that Assange will become a free man? And a 5-year-old Afghan boy's passion for Lionel Messi and football grabs the world's attention. His dream of meeting his real-life hero could be a reality soon. As Syrians battle the most serious humanitarian crisis in the world, there is hope for the millions of people who have been displaced by the conflict. Rich nations have pledged more than $10 billion for them. But just 1 day before billions were pledged at that donor conference in London, UN-led talks in Geneva aimed at achieving a ceasefire in Syria grinded to a halt. For now, there is simply no end in sight to Syria's 5-year-old civil war.
Days after United Nations suspended Syria peace talks aimed at ending ongoing war, world leaders pledged over $10 billion to help conflict-hit Syrians at a London conference. The European Union, Germany, Britain and the US were among the biggest donors to provide food, education and job opportunities for Syrians. The conference aimed at raising billions to alleviate the Syrian refugee problem, the most serious humanitarian crisis in the world. According to an assistance plan released by the UN, it requires almost $9 billion to alleviate the refugee issue.
Let us change the narrative. Let us, with our solidarity and generosity and compassionate leadership, bring true hope to the people of Syria and the region.
Meanwhile, fighting intensified in parts of Syria with clashes reported between rebel and government forces. The Syrian army, backed by Russian airstrikes, broke through rebel lines on Wednesday to Nubul and Al-Zahra. Government forces have continued operations near Aleppo after cutting the insurgents' most important supply route from the Turkish border. The offensive against rebels sped up as negotiators gathered in Geneva for peace talks that were ultimately suspended. A senior UN official said the Russian escalation was the main reason for the suspension of peace talks. UN envoy had earlier called for a ceasefire in Syria, but Russia refused to suspend its airstrikes. Syrian opposition threatened to boycott future talks unless a change on the ground. Moscow accuses Washington of supporting terrorists, while the US State Department said the airstrikes around Aleppo focused mainly on Assad's foes rather than the Islamic State militants. Washington is backing opponents of Assad. Russia even accused Turkey of preparing for a military incursion in Syria.
We see it as a dangerous development and an attempt to cover up illegal military activity near the Syrian border. We have solid ground for suspecting that Turkey is intensively preparing for a military intervention.
Turkey in return accused the Assad regime of using a middle-century war strategy of starvation against civilians near Aleppo. With many Syrians in desperate need of aid and assistance, the Red Cross delivered food for more than 12,000 people to the besieged Syrian town of Modamia near Damascus. The agency is seeking access to bring more aid to the besieged town of Madaya in rural Damascus and other areas. Although world powers have pledged massive help, it will take time to reach the ground, but till then urgent measures need to be taken as the ongoing war is creating more and more victims and refugees by the day.
In Myanmar, National League for Democracy party leader Aung San Suu Kyi has praised various parties and military MPs for a successful start to the country's first NLD-dominated parliament. Hundreds of lawmakers from Suu Kyi's party were sworn into Myanmar's parliament on Monday, with enough seats to choose the country's first democratically elected government since the military took power in 1962. The NLD won some 80% of elected seats in November's historic vote. The Myanmar parliament has elected Win Mint and Man Win Khaing Khan of the NLD party as the lower and upper house speakers. A Saudi Arabian court has overturned the death penalty for Palestinian poet Ashraf Fayyad, but upheld his guilty verdict on a charge of apostasy. The court instead sentenced Fayyad to 8 years in prison and 800 lashes. Fayyad was initially sentenced to death by a court in the Saudi city of Aba in November on a series of blasphemy charges related to his poetry. The sentence caused an international outcry. A historic Trans-Pacific Partnership Pact was signed by 12 member nations in New Zealand. But the deal is still work in progress. At least 6 of the member nations need to ratify it in 2 years for it to come into effect. What's more, the deal hasn't come without its share of controversy. Those opposed to it say it will take jobs away from them and ask why the secrecy around the negotiations for 5 years.
It takes 5 long years for a historic Trans-Pacific Partnership Pact signing ceremony to become real. TPP, one of the world's biggest multinational trade deals, was signed by ministers from 12 member nations in New Zealand on Thursday. The deal, which will cover nearly 40% population of the world economy, will still require years of tough negotiations to come into effect.
To make the economic opportunities of TPP a reality for our businesses and our consumers, our investors and our workers, we need to complete our respective domestic processes so we can ratify TPP and bring it into force.
The deal was signed amid protests in New Zealand. TPP will now undergo a 2-year ratification period in which at least 6 countries must approve the final text for the deal to be implemented. The 12 nations party to the deal are Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, United States and Vietnam. The deal that was agreed in October last year looks to facilitate investment between 12 countries across the Pacific Rim. It also aims to deepen economic ties, slashing tariffs and fostering trade to boost growth. The agreement could create a new single market like the European Union. The proponents of the deal hope that it will unleash a new economic growth. Those opposing the deal, particularly in America, fear that it would lead jobs being moved from the US to developing nations. Opponents also question the way that negotiations were held secretly during the last 5 years. Concerns are also raised about reduced access to things like affordable medicines. A clause which allows foreign investors the right to sue if they feel their profits have been impacted by a law or policy in the host country has also triggered criticism. While the joint deal is aimed at liberalizing commerce across the countries, not all of the industries and sectors involved will benefit as much as others.
Imagine a life wherein you are no longer able to lift a spoon to eat, hold a toothbrush to brush your teeth, and are unable to use your hands or even your feet for your daily chores. Abul Bajandar in Dhaka is braving the odds that you and me shudder to even imagine. But help is round the corner for Abul. Doctors have offered to conduct a surgery and the Bangladesh government says it will pay for the cost of surgery.
30-year-old Abdul Bajander is all set to undergo a life-changing surgery. Dubbed as Tree Man for massive bark-like warts on his hands and feet, Bajander has been deprived of a normal life for most of his life. The massive warts, which first started appearing when he was a teenager, began spreading rapidly 4 years ago. The extremely rare genetic disease has been diagnosed as epidermodysplasia verruciformis. A rickshaw driver in the southern district of Khulna in Dhaka, Bajander had to give up his job as his condition worsened over time. The warts that weigh around 11 pounds make him face difficulty in his doing day-to-day tasks. Now he can no longer lift a fork to eat or hold a toothbrush to brush his teeth. After knowing about the plight of Bajander, doctors of Dhaka Medical College Hospital have offered to conduct a surgery. The government has announced to pay for the surgery costs. Team of doctors has been formed to perform the operation and necessary tests are being done. An Indonesian villager with massive warts all over his body underwent a string of operations in 2008 to remove them. The disease is caused by a defect in the immune system, which increases susceptibility to human papilloma virus.
With a crucial ruling of a UN panel backing him, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can claim that he stands vindicated. But a favourable verdict does not mean the end to his troubles. The UK and Sweden are not ready to back off just yet. The question is, what's next for Assange? Freedom, arrest, or still a life in detention?
In a latest twist, a UN panel has held that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange should be allowed to go free from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Calling his 3.5-year detention as arbitrary, the panel also said that he be awarded compensation for the duration. Assange had enraged the United States by publishing hundreds of thousands of secret US diplomatic cables. He has been holed up in the embassy since June 2012 to avoid a rape investigation in Sweden.
5 years, the investigation is still preliminary, no charges have been filed against him, but still he is deprived of his liberty. If this is not arbitrary, what is arbitrary detention?
Assange has denied allegations of a 2010 rape in Sweden. He claimed that the charge is a ploy to eventually take him to the United States, where a criminal investigation into the activities of WikiLeaks is still open.
How sweet it is. This is a victory that cannot be denied. It is a victory of historical importance, not just for me, for my family, for my children, but for the independence of the UN system.
Both Britain and Sweden denied that Assange was being deprived of freedom, arguing that he has entered the embassy voluntarily. Britain said Assange would be arrested if he left the embassy. British Foreign Secretary even rejected the findings of the UN panel, terming it ridiculous.
Well, I reject the finding of this working group. It's a group made up of lay people, not lawyers. Their conclusion is flawed in law. Julian Assange is a fugitive from justice. He's not being detained by us, but he will have to face justice in Sweden if he chooses to do so.
Swedish prosecutors said the UN panel's decision had no formal impact on the rape investigation under Swedish law. The problem for WikiLeaks started in 2010. The group released over 90,000 secret documents on the US-led military campaign in Afghanistan, followed by almost 400,000 US military reports detailing operations in Iraq. The disclosures were followed by release of millions of diplomatic cables dating back to 1973, inviting US ire.
The proverbial bugle has been sounded. The race for the White House has got off to an exciting start. Will it be Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders as the Democratic nominee? Will it be Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or Marco Rubio, or a dark horse being counted out for now? Who will finally clinch the Republican nomination? That answer is months away. For now, the battle has just about begun and in full force.
This Monday marked the official start of the race for the White House for 2016. Democrats and Republicans set the ball rolling with the Iowa caucus, the first caucus before the process reaches the remaining 49 states in the United States. Stumping quite a few in the Republican camp, Ted Cruz was at pole position, followed by Donald Trump. And Marco Rubio came a close third. Far from closing the chapter post-defeat, Donald Trump claimed Cruz had taken to treachery to win Iowa and demanded a repoll or nullification of Cruz's results.
That's like a fraud. They said Ben Carson's essentially left the race, vote for the guy, right? I said, how can they do that? And then he doesn't get the votes, Ben, but Ted gets the votes, and you say, give me a break.
A confident Cruz fought back, calling the onslaught another tantrum of Trump and slamming him as a tweeter-in-chief after Trump took to social media to lash out at the Texas senator.
I don't think people are interested in insults and attacks. And so other candidates, Donald and others, have tossed more than a few nasty personal attacks my way.
In the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton managed a very razor-sharp victory margin ahead of her rival Bernie Sanders. A similar war of words was also witnessed in the rival Democratic camp as Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders traded barbs over who best embodies progressive values ahead of the New Hampshire primary next Tuesday. On Thursday, Hillary and Sanders were locked in their most contentious presidential debate yet. Hillary questioned if his ambitious proposals were viable, saying it was unfair to question her liberal credentials. Sanders fought back repeatedly, accusing Clinton of representing the political establishment.
I am very proud to be the only candidate up here who does not have a super PAC, who is not raising huge sums of money from Wall Street or special interests.
I just absolutely reject that, Senator. And I really don't think these kinds of attacks by insinuation are worthy of you. And enough is enough.
According to a latest opinion poll, Republican Donald Trump is holding fort in New Hampshire with a double-digit lead over his nearest rival, Marco Rubio, while Democratic presidential aspirant Bernie Sanders has a massive lead over Hillary Clinton. Senator Cruz, who surprised many by winning the Iowa caucus, is now trailing third. Sanders is favored in New Hampshire, though Clinton's prospects are stronger after New Hampshire. Primaries and caucuses are the way America chooses its presidential nominees and will continue state by state until June, little over a month before July's Republican and Democratic Party conventions. They have evolved over time rather than being stipulated in the U.S. Constitution and involve voters determining the affiliations of delegates their states will send to national party conventions where the final nominee is anointed. In a primary, people show up at neighborhood polling place to vote for their candidate by ballot. A caucus is very different. It's a neighborhood event that requires several hours of active community participation and debate and takes place in the evening in a home or public space depending on the size of the caucus location. This is just the beginning of the race for the next president of the United States of America.
Police in South Chicago are probing the death of 6 as homicide. The bodies of 5 adults and a child were found on Thursday in a house. Police said they found the bodies after someone asked for a well-being check at the home because someone who lived there had not shown up for work. The multiple homicides come after Chicago's most murderous January since 2000. The city registered 51 homicides last month, up from 29 in the first month of 2015. Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe has declared a state of disaster in many rural areas hit by severe drought. An estimated 26% of the population is facing food shortages in the country. Mugabe has blamed low farm yields on erratic rains due to climate change, as well as sanctions imposed by Western countries over the government's tainted human rights record. Formerly known as the breadbasket of Africa, Zimbabwe has suffered constant shortages in recent years. ISIL fighters have streamed into Libya in recent months, heightening fears that the fighters are gaining ground and influence in the divided North African country. About 5,000 Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant fighters are now in Libya, double the earlier estimates, while the number in Iraq and Syria has dropped. The updated figures come as the U.S. administration of President Barack Obama faces growing calls for the American military to step up action against IS in Libya, where fighters have already seized the city of Sirte and an adjoining length of Mediterranean coastline. And here's a look at some more stories that are making headlines the world over. Donald Trump is no stranger to controversy, so he has landed himself into a fresh one now. And Halle Berry has got candid on what she feels is lacking in Hollywood. All that and more in Showbuzz.
This time around, when Donald Trump took the stage in Iowa with Adele's Rolling in the Deep playing in the background, little did he know that he would have to face the wrath of the singer. British pop star Adele has asked Republican US presidential contender Trump to stop using her music during his campaign. She said the politician has not taken her permission to use the track. As the color controversy over Oscar nominations rages, actress Halle Berry has called the lack of diversity in Hollywood heartbreaking. She said a lack of truthful storytelling in Hollywood has contributed to the lack of diversity. Halle Berry is the only black actress to win an Academy Award for the Best Actress for her performance in Monsters Ball.
There she is.
Born This Way star Lady Gaga is all set to lead an experiential tribute to late British singer David Bowie at the Grammy Awards this month. Gaga would perform 3 or 4 of Bowie's songs. British rock band Coldplay is all set for the 2016 Super Bowl halftime show for Sunday's game in Santa Clara, California. The band members termed the opportunity as the biggest honor, saying they would try to make the show as memorable as some of their favorites.
3 years ago.
Morris White, founder of R&B funk band Earth, Wind and Fire, died in Los Angeles at age 74. White died at his home on Wednesday night. A sessions drummer, he founded Earth, Wind and Fire in 1969 after he moved from Chicago to Los Angeles. The Grammy-winning band enjoyed numerous hits including Shining Star, Boogie Wonderland and September.
A musical theatre that moves from village to village but is facing the threat of extinction. The Chinese opera that came to Thailand decades ago is staring at that fate today. The performers live like nomads and on the margins. They are struggling now to breathe life into a dying art form.
Thai performers caked in makeup belt out the piercing notes of Chinese opera. An art form under threat by changing cultural habits and demographics in a kingdom reshaped by centuries of immigration from the north. With the Chinese New Year kicking off next week, the nomadic Lao San Chia Sun troupe pitch their stage wherever they are invited. But this form of musical theatre is struggling to survive as younger generations look for entertainment elsewhere, something that performers desperately want to change.
Nowadays, it's hard to find Chinese operas. Audiences like the way we do the makeup and the way we dress, which are unique and different from traditional Thai opera shows.
At first, I didn't understand what the plays were about, but I liked them. They had beautiful makeup, so I wanted to perform as well. Also, I get to travel to every province of the country.
About 14% of the Thai population is ethnic Chinese, following centuries of immigration and assimilation. Many more have Chinese roots among their forebears. There was a time when nomadic Chinese opera troupes were a common feature of the Thai landscape, traveling from village to village, bringing the entertaining sights and sounds of a tradition that dates back centuries. Performers raise their children, eat and sleep beneath the stage, then move to a new venue in a few days. A hard life for someone to easily get attracted to.
It's a hard life because we barely go back home. We perform all year long, non-stop.
Most communities that invite operas to perform do it more as a way to honor ancestors than to entertain the masses.
Number 5. A huge Messi fan and dons a jersey that reads Messi. But it's a plastic one that his brother got him because that's all that his family living in a remote region of Afghanistan can afford. His circumstances notwithstanding, he has a dream to meet his star. The strength of his passion may well make his dream come true.
Barcelona's star Lionel Messi and 5-year-old Afghan boy Murtaza Ahmadi have so much in common. Their love for football and the similar jerseys they wear. Yes, Murtaza's Messi jersey has even made him popular across the world. But the sad part of the story is that Murtaza can neither afford a jersey like his favourite star, nor does he have a football to play with. Murtaza is from a poor family which lives in a remote rural area in a Taliban-controlled area of the war-torn nation. As Murtaza's brother learned about the younger one's love for football, he made him the shirt from a plastic bag with Messi written on it in black. And this plastic jersey makes the little boy feel no less than Messi, with whom he wants to meet one day. Murtaza's pictures went viral on social media as soon as they were posted by his brother. A desperate search to identify the boy was started. His newfound fame was only known to his family when his father recently visited Kabul. As heartbreaking images of the boy kicking his punctured football went around the world, it didn't take too long for good news to arrive. According to reports, Lionel Messi Charity is keen to do something for the kid. Afghan Football Federation has also said that it will set up a meeting between Messi and Murtaza Ahmadi. Let's hope Murtaza's dream comes true soon.
That's the stuff dreams are made of. That brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect. Do keep writing to us to share your feedback on the show. Our email ID is worldconnect@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. It's time to say goodbye, but before we leave, here are some images of the Lunar New Year celebrations in London. The Chinese New Year begins on Monday with preparations and celebrations kicking off across countries. We will see you again next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching.